Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? My name is Sami. I'm the CEO of CertiCraft. We are on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the new regulated market here in Canada. I guess I should stop saying new because it's been 3 years now. It's into the cannabis regulation framework that exists in Canada today. This is the State of Craft. It is a series where we aim to facilitate really interesting discussions showcasing many different perspectives on the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. And today I'm excited to invite two of the main leaders of the BC Craft Farmers Co-op, amongst other people as well. But we'll get into that in a moment. I wanted to take care of a few housekeeping things first. We have a chat where if you want to say hi, you want to say whatever you want, you can go and introduce yourselves there and have a discussion there. We have a dedicated separate questions tab. If you have any questions for David or Sophie, please ask them there. We'll have a Q&A, 15-minute Q&A at the very end. And last but not least, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube eventually, please like and subscribe if you're into this video. We would very much appreciate that. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you David and Sophie. I would love it if each of you can just give us a little brief 30 to 60-second intro on who you are and what your relationship is with the craft cannabis industry. And then after that, I'll ask you to introduce your organization.
Sophie, go ahead.
All right, I'll get started. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here today. Thank you, Sami and Nick. So my name is Sophie Mas. The accent that you're hearing is a French accent. I'm a French, so you don't spend the next hour trying to figure out what accent it is. I've been, even though I'm from the south of France, I've been in Canada for 30 years, which probably ages me a lot, but I've been here for a while. Got involved in the cannabis industry. Well, I've been involved as a consumer for many, many, many years. But I would say even more so back in 2016. I was at the time working for the provincial government. I would say I've spent most of my career working for the province of BC and specifically for the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. And so in 2016, they created the Provincial Secretariat for Cannabis Legalization and Regulation. And so that's how I got involved in the file. When the Canadian, the Federal Task Force was created, so right from the get-go, before the Cannabis Act was implemented. So I got a chance to work with Health Canada, the municipalities, and of course with the province, and developed the regulatory framework for cannabis in BC. And I'm not going to take responsibility for all the stuff that's happened because I left 3 years ago, and I like to say, and things unraveled. I'm kidding, but I left. I left government 3 years ago to pursue other endeavors and definitely to work with individuals and companies, which is what I do now, and help them navigate the rather complex regulatory and compliance and environment that we have. And also had an opportunity to work with David and others to create the BC Craft Farmers Co-op. And so that's what I do today. Just really enjoying working with individuals and companies in this fantastic space, which is very always moving and full of passionate and incredible people.
Perfect segue to David. You want to tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Sami. Thanks for hosting us. My name's David Hurford. On the traditional unceded land of the Indigenous people here in BC and West Vancouver. Greetings to everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us on my day off today. So I couldn't think of a better way to spend the day off than hanging out with you guys. For me, my background on cannabis from a policy perspective goes back to I had the honor of working for Mr. Chrétien's government for his term. A number of those years were as a senior advisor to the Minister of Health, who luckily for us was a gentleman named Alan Rock. And worked on a number of diverse files in the health space. Sorry about that. And one of them that landed on my desk was cannabis. And that came to me through the work that Health Canada was doing at the time on the AIDS strategy and also on end-of-life issues, of course, coming out of BC. And that would have been 1999-2000 period. And out of that came the medical cannabis movement, and was very involved with the minister in developing the regulations that we still have in place today, often working against our own government in many times, but there was certainly a political will to get that done, and happy to see that that has stood the test of time. Stayed involved in cannabis policy after that through the Liberal Party of Canada. I was a national policy secretary for the party for a couple of years after Mr. Trudeau was elected. But before that, a number of years with the BC wing of the federal party here, advocating for a number of policies, but certainly cannabis legalization was one of them. We came close in 2005 at our national convention, but were eventually successful in 2011 to get it into the platform. And of course, Mr. Trudeau decided on that beach there in Kelowna to include it, or whenever he made that announcement, and it was in the platform, and here we are today. So that's been my past on cannabis, and now am continue to be active when as a volunteer. I'm a volunteer on this, but when we started to see the the BC industry starting to lose out in legalization, it started to be something that I was concerned about. I want the policy to succeed. And if the BC farmers, small farmers across Canada, but particularly BC craft farmers, are not in, the policy will not be successful. So that's my big fear, and that's why I'm here today.
And I'm assuming that led to then the eventual creation of the BC Craft Farmers Co-op. Is that a correct assumption?
Sure, I'll pick that up, and Sophie can add a little bit. It's a good segue into that. Yeah, for sure. There was a number of people at the time who were excited about legalization, obviously, and we would expect BC would have benefited the most from legalization, given our great global reputation. It's a huge strength for us, but it clearly hasn't gone that way. And so a number of folks were concerned about that. One particular group in Vancouver, GrowTech Labs, deserves a lot of credit for stepping up. They wanted to make sure that the headquarters of the global cannabis industry stayed in Vancouver. That was good for BC. That was good for everybody. So we really went out and looked at what the best model was. We weren't sure. And we did a lot of consultation, a lot of engagement. The reason the federal medical policy was successful is because it was written by the growers, the compassion clubs of the day. We went out and we engaged them, and because the Health Canada people didn't know the first thing about cannabis then. So it was really bottom up. The experts in the field are the people who are actually in the field. And so we went out and talked to them about the concerns, and we wanted to build an organization that could be there for them, protect their independence, which we felt was under some threat with the market, the way the government had set it up, and let them know that there was a community that was behind them, that they weren't alone. And so that's what we did. And the co-op model looked to us like the best model because it was entrepreneurial. It encouraged, independent business to succeed. There was a really good piece of legislation in BC called the Bc Cooperatives Act. We wanted to build an organization that the government could trust, because it's very important for the government to get this right, that they have access to the experts. And it's tough to organize craft farmers because they've all been hiding. They've had to hide. So it's tough to get them out. So I think for us, we wanted to create an organization that the government could trust as a conduit to the sector that could effectively deliver programming and whatever needed to be done to communicate with this very unique group of people. And so we did that, and it was democratic. I think when we talked, people wanted to make sure that it could never be taken over. A lot of concerns about, consolidation, and people are skeptical. So we wanted to build a governance structure that guaranteed that the organization would continue to represent who it was built for, and that was for craft farmers, small processors and BC processors, and independent retailers. And so that's really what we set out to do. And it was a great team that came together, and here we are today. So Sophie might want to talk more about what's going on today, but that's more the origin, Sami.
Cool. Sophie, do you want to take over?
Yes, that's the origins, and it's been great to see how much it's grown over the last few years. I had the opportunity to get involved with David and GrowTech Labs from the beginning, and there's been a group of us as initial founders. And the culmination of all these efforts was our first AGM last August, so a few months ago now, bringing the AGM and the conference, bringing growers, processors, retailers, and also another category that we call vendors/supporters, which is anyone that provides a service to the cannabis industry. So it can be accountants, lawyers, people selling organic products, you name it.
CertiCraft.
And CertiCraft, exactly. And so it was great to see the turnout and to finally see it come together, to see the interest in building this community and sharing information. And out of that AGM, elected a board, and a number of committees have been set up. And I have to say that in the past few months, there's been a flurry of activities happening and a lot of accomplishments, which is great, because the trust that David was talking about, like establishing this organization with government, you can trust an organization, but the proof is in the pudding, right? So if you continue delivering, producing, having a lot of good activities and doing the outreach and bringing new members, I think the provincial government and the federal governments really see the BC Craft organization as a solid organization with professional people. So we have done a number of things. There's a quality standards committee that has been established and quite active, and has developed a quality standards discussion paper, like a paper that's in a protocol. It's actually posted on the website that everyone can access. Really talking about what quality means in craft cannabis, having a number of pillars, talking about a BC appellation for craft cannabis, which is something that we've raised with the government and will continue to pursue. We have an investment committee that's currently developing a business plan for the co-op with input from our members. We have a membership committee that's very active, and we have networking sessions every 2 weeks, which really the point is to create and expand on that community and bring people together so that they can share tips and advice and discuss topics of interest. And we have a public affairs committee as well in medical access that's really looking at the outreach to government, advocacy for all the levels of government, and looking at the important issue of medical access. So lots of good things happening.
You guys are doing quite a bit there.
This bit, yeah. And the last thing is the direct sales and farm to gate sales working group that's just been created with all our Health Canada license members. We had the first meeting, I think it was last week or 2 weeks, which is really to organize the co-op members and be able to go to government and say, hey, we have a number of recommendations in anticipation of direct delivery and farm to gate sales, and we want to consult with you, and we want to tell you what's going to work and what's not going to work. So lots of good things happening, and we have our second AGM next Saturday, followed by a micro conference, which is very exciting. We have an exciting agenda. We'll get to hear from the province, which is great. We've been able to confirm the Secretariat will be speaking at the conference, and provincial providing an update. So a lot of good things cooking.
Cool, and I'll definitely be asking you more about the micro conference before we wrap up here today, because I want to give you guys a chance to share more about that, because that sounds like something that'd be interesting to a lot of our audience here today, and to myself. I've seen it advertised, but I haven't read anything about it, so I know nothing other than the name. So thank you to both of you for that intro and for being here today to share your perspective with all of us here. I guess when we do these series, we usually ask 3 questions: what's going well in the industry, in the legal craft cannabis industry, what's not going well, and what are things that need to change, either on like a producer level, a government level, at every level of government, I guess, in order to address these major issues, in order to ensure that the industry and the sector can thrive. And so we typically go in that kind of order, because that's kind of the order of least amount of time to most amount of discussion. So I'm going to start off with that. What do you guys both see as going well so far in the legal craft cannabis industry?
Sophie?
Okay, all right. So what has gone well? We're reflecting over the last few years. Well, the fact that we actually have cannabis legalized, have to give the hats up, right? We are the second country in the world after we're legalizing cannabis. And perhaps maybe at this stage, we might be taking it for granted, but other countries are looking at us with envy. When you're looking at European countries where, and I can speak for France, being from there, where they have not legalized cannabis, it's still a big taboo, and they're pushing for legalization, but it's going to take a while. They look at Canada, it's like, wow, you guys are really advanced. So let's start with that high note. They
don't see the myriad of challenges that small farmers face. They just see it's legal, and that's it.
Legal. you can sell it, you can consume it, you can process it, and I can tell you, for my family having discussions 3 years ago, there was just stands that I was even involved in the cannabis industry, and that Canada would even legalize it because they would consider it like a drug. And for a lot of people in a lot of countries, they see very much cannabis as a drug. So Canada has come a long way. So we have to give ourselves some kudos for that. Kudos to David for pushing that for so many years. Thank you. In terms of it's gone well, so we now have legislation and regulations in place. You can process cannabis to a limit of 30 grams. Personal production, you can grow 4 plants, which is great. So that's definitely a good one. We can actually distribute and sell cannabis. If you want to go to a store, you can actually find cannabis. You can also, and I'm not going to talk about BC here, buy it online, but strictly from government. So those are all good things that we need to acknowledge. And then the other thing that I want to mention is some changes in attitude. We're still not there yet, but I think people are seeing cannabis as a way of life. I think that several years ago, there was still a lot of stigma, and there's still stigma attached to it, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it. But people embrace cannabis. It's kind of a way of life. It's more accepted, just like alcohol is. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I've definitely seen some improvement and some evolution in people's attitudes and behavior around cannabis. So those are great things.
Anything to add to that, David?
Well, we can save some time here because I'll be much shorter about what's gone well. I think it's good that people aren't getting arrested for cannabis possession, at least not that I'm aware of anymore. And that would be about the end of it for me. I think the whole craft policy is a complete disaster, frankly. I think it needs to be completely reset. When I worked in public affairs for 25 years, I want to be proud of the policies that I worked on. I'm very proud to say I worked on the medical policy back. I would not be proud of this policy if I was in the government, federal government today. I think it needs a whole reset, and I can't really say anything good about it. I do believe that the people that have made it through the licensing process, the 49 or so in BC in the 3 years that we've got out of the thousands and thousands of people growing cannabis, they are warriors. These people that have gone through this process to date, we all owe them an amazing debt of gratitude. Like, wow, I hear stories about what people have gone through, million bucks to get a small farm going. Like, my goodness, this is ridiculous. And what perseverance of these people, the human spirit. I think for a lot of us who know craft farmers for a while, we're not really that surprised because people are doing it because they love the plant. But the craft policy in Canada is a complete failure. And what I'm concerned about is people will hold up the Canadian policy in other parts of the world and say, look at Canada's policy and how great it is. And small farmers in other countries will be shut out. And it's not just cannabis. We see protests around the world of small farmers being shut out of agriculture industries all over the place. And cannabis to that extent is no different. The opportunity we have here is those kind of systemic challenges that small farmers have had in these other agriculture sectors have been systemic for years. We have an opportunity to create an industry from scratch where we could fix those things. Emphasize Indigenous farmers, small businesses, women entrepreneurs. We're not doing any of that, and we're missing this incredibly huge opportunity. So sorry, I should have given a shorter answer, but
no, this is great. This is perfect. This is like exactly what the point of this series is. No, so I want to dive into that more, David. So you're saying that on a policy level, it's a complete failure as it relates to craft farmers and craft cannabis production, and that implies that literally everything has gone wrong in terms of the policy. With that being said, are there any specific things that you would say are worse offenders than others within the policies that have been created, or is it really just the whole thing needs to be redone from the Cannabis Act level onwards, or where would you kind of really point to if you had to point to specific things?
Well, I kind of look at it from a consumer perspective.
Okay.
I think the consumer is ultimately who the system is built for, so they can legally consume. So I think the biggest problem, essentially, is this, and that is this.
One sec. I'm just going to increase your screen here so everybody can see this more clearly.
This is your Canadian cannabis market right now. You've got 4 companies that control 54% of the market. So as a consumer, you don't have much of a choice. And I think of these 4 companies, there may be very good people working in them, but I think they're all run out of the States. There might be some exceptions, people will correct me, but I think they're ultimately now run out of the USA. And if you go down, where's the craft share of that market? The product that all the consumers actually want to buy local? Last time I checked a year ago, it was less than 1%. So I think this is what is fundamentally the worst part of what's wrong, is that the consumers are shut out and they don't have a choice. So these people now control the price. They can push the price down to keep small farmers out. There's a whole bunch of bad things that come when you have that kind of consolidation of the market in any business, really. And, the task force that was set up after Mr. Trudeau was elected, chaired by Anne McClellan, and I give Ms. McClellan credit. She did a really good job on this task force. She was not a big fan of cannabis, in my experience, working around her in Mr. Chrétien's government. Very competent, hardworking minister, but she was not a cannabis advocate. But her task force report did a great job, and I think that she set a great tone. And in that report, she warned about what will happen if we allow this consolidation to occur, that monopolies start to develop and the consumers get disadvantaged and small businesses can't get into the market. So I think, Sami, that is, all of these things are leading to that major problem. And I think that's why the government needs to step in and fix it. The other thing I think that is a major problem, apologies for the sound, is that the government has not looked at this as an economic development opportunity. The fact that Health Canada is running the industry is a problem. It's not why Health Canada is created. Health Canada is there to protect public health. And the last time I checked, cannabis shouldn't be too high on that public health threat list. We've been giving it to medical patients for 25 years, 20 years. I've lost count. No harmful effects. No one's dying. So,
and much longer if you go to before the medical framework was created.
So to me, I think the big mistake is that the governments, and to some extent the provincial government in BC, needs to do a little more work on this. I think they completely understand it, and I think that they are champions for us. But the job opportunities, the rural economic development opportunities, the Indigenous, the women entrepreneurs, all those things I talked about earlier, the government is absolutely missing the boat on this. This is as big as forestry. We watch these wars in the woods now going on in British Columbia over the forest industry. I'm not going to comment on that, but the cannabis industry in BC has the potential to dwarf the forest industry if we do it right. There is a global demand for our product. So it isn't just about the BC or the Canadian market for us. I think we need to be thinking of markets in New York, Asia, Europe that want BC bud. So I think those are the big challenges and things that are what's wrong.
So I have one clarification question for you, David, before I turn the floor over to Sophie here. And it's more just, I don't have a background in politics. I don't really understand a lot of what happens behind the scenes. And what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is, if this task force by somebody who was conservative and fairly anti-cannabis, who did a whole bunch of research and ended up with a report that was very thorough, as you were saying, if that took place, then how does the policy that gets created ignore a lot of what was brought up in that task force? Is this a matter of just, money changing hands behind the scenes? Is it a matter of lobbyist organizations representing big corporations coming in? Is there something different going on? Could you help everybody here understand how you have that incongruousness between those two situations?
Yeah, there's entrenched forces in government that don't want to rock the status quo. That is just the basics of government. It doesn't have to be cannabis. It's extra acute because of the stigma. The people that we're asking to bring in a whole new bold policy have actually been prosecuting people for doing the same thing for the last. You can't expect those people to turn overnight. In cannabis, it's It's not just the criminal justice system and the police, it's also the medical establishment as well that has been slow to embrace cannabis, for example, even today as we look at the opioid crisis, that they've still been slow to embrace cannabis and the health benefits of cannabis. I think there's my experience in government, it doesn't really matter what it is. There's a status quo that's entrenched and you have to work extra hard to get it. Why did we do a Truth and Reconciliation report years ago and we haven't seen action taken? There is just inertia within government, and sometimes you just need to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. So I think that's really what we're up against, is that the government never wanted legalization. Mm-hmm. It was Mr. Trudeau who made a political commitment to do it. So really on cannabis, my last word would be that we've really only seen progress in cannabis in Canada in two ways. One, you had a politician that was ready to stick their neck out and show leadership and stick with it. And I hope that we'll see that with the BC government as well in terms of pushing these things through with the Premier and the BC government. I think that they are keen to show leadership. Or a court makes a decision and orders the government to do it. We haven't seen progress in cannabis really in Canada because officials were necessarily coming up with innovative solutions. So I think there's a status quo entrenched, and that's just what we need to work against.
So to paraphrase what you just said there, essentially decisions were made that the people who came up with the policies just like did not support. And so it was always like, I'm being forced to do this. And so I'm not going to do a fantastic job because I literally just don't care about this thing. Or I'm actively like, don't want this to be realized. Is that accurate summation?
I think so, because there's certainly people within the government that support this. I think they're trying and they're working hard every day. I think that there's many people that have good intentions, but there's a lot of competing priorities in government, and you have to, you've got 20 things to do in a day. Where does craft cannabis fit on that list if you're in Health Canada? That's why, again, the point to me is that Health Canada really is not the proper place to be leading the cannabis file. It should be, there's a role for Health Canada to play, but I think that it's a matter of, whereas in an economic portfolio, agriculture, economic development, you look at the job numbers, it's easier to make the case that this should be a higher priority. So there's so many competing priorities in government that, it's just a matter, and Sophie can certainly speak to that as well.
So, Sophie, on that note, what do you see as being like the major hindrances and the major challenges today for legal craft cannabis in Canada?
So I'm going to concur with David and add some background and some context, because I was with the province when we were told by Trudeau, okay, now cannabis is being legalized and off you go and figure it out, develop the legislation and regulations. And so we didn't have a lot of time to figure it out. And it's not like if it came with a blueprint. And at the time, and interestingly enough, so think about it, Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General, which for those of you who don't know, it's policing. A lot of it is very focused on enforcement. And that's the ministry that inherited the file of cannabis. Just that sets the tone, right? So they look after corrections, policing, and now cannabis. At the time we started, there were two big files, cannabis and the opioid crisis, which is interesting. And so a lot of resources were deployed to develop the regulatory framework for cannabis. Again, no blueprint. So then you're looking at things that are kind of similar, which is from a regulatory standpoint, which is liquor and tobacco. So when we did our policy analysis, that's what we were looking at, which comes with its faults, of course, because cannabis is not like liquor, it's not like tobacco. But when you look at the way it's regulated in BC, the liquor distribution branch is responsible for the distribution, the liquor control and cannabis branch is responsible for the licensing of retail stores, and that's the way it's done for liquor as well. When you look at the marketing and advertising restrictions that are imposed on cannabis, they are the same ones as for tobacco, very much similar. Which is right there and then is an issue, because cannabis does not harm. It's not like alcohol. No one has died from cannabis. To have the same restrictions imposed on cannabis as it is on tobacco is going way too far. And so just drawing the parallel between liquor, tobacco, and cannabis, I think has had a lot of issues. From a practical standpoint too, when you're looking at storing cannabis in a warehouse in Richmond and distributing it to the retailers, you can do that with liquor because it's not going to go bad, but cannabis will. So you can't store flour.
It's an organic product. It's not shelf
stable. Right? It's not going to work. So we have a model that perhaps might have been okay. And I mean, I would even argue that it was not when we put it in place, but we can continue with that. The other thing is that if you look at the goals of why do we legalize cannabis, if you look at the provincial government's goals, one of it is like to prevent access from youth, to protect the safety of people, to prevent the movement of cannabis to illicit markets. And then the fifth goal, and then to prevent drug-impaired driving, there was one around that. And then the fifth one was around economic development. But that really became last. So, and there's an inherent conflict with those goals. You can't protect the public. Now, why would you want to protect the public from cannabis is a larger question. But you can't protect the public and put all those heavy regulations in place. And at the same time, make sure that the legal market thrives, because you're tightening everything so much that the illegal market is going to continue to thrive. The black market is going to continue to thrive because people are going to continue buying from, whatever website they find, because the product is cheaper, it's better quality, and they have a larger variety. So fast forward 3 years later, regulations haven't changed. Everything is still very tight. And you have what we have now, where you still have half of the population that's still going to the plethora of websites that exist, that provide a product that a lot of people feel superior to what you can find in retail stores, legal retail stores. You have more variety. You're also able to get, thinking about edibles with a larger concentration of THC, whereas the Health Canada regulations that have been imposed, as we know, are very small, like 10 milligram. Which is a heck of a lot of chocolate you're gonna need to eat if you gotta get a buzz from the sugar before you get a buzz from the THC. Yeah. So as regulators, I know we went to Colorado, for example, right away to kind of learn from them. And there were two things that came out of the meetings that we had with the officials. First of all, legalizing cannabis, the sky's not gonna fall off. Everything is going to be okay, which was good to hear, because we could relate that back to the politicians who were kind of anxious about legalizing cannabis. The second thing we heard was start tightly regulating, because then you can relax the regulations, and you will have to do that in order to continue to advance and progress with the industry. Problem is, nothing has been relaxed. So when you look at BC, the online delivery, like that's not allowed, which is why the illegal market continues to thrive, because people can just order online, get it delivered to the door. We need to move ahead and progress, and that has not happened. So I would say that's one of the roadblocks. I concur with David that the file is with Public Safety and Solicitor General, and it is with Health Canada, which perhaps might have been okay at the beginning, but should ideally be transferred to ministries that are looking at the economic opportunities, the job creation, and looking at it from an industry standpoint. And
ministries that understand agriculture, like those two ministries you mentioned, like Health Canada has no idea what agriculture is about. The police have no idea what agriculture is about. So it just makes no sense that you'd have the people in charge of what is largely an agricultural industry to just have no inside expertise on what that means.
That's right. Exactly. So, and not looking at it from a business standpoint, when you have all the retailers and they're faced day to day with running their business, and same thing with the growers, right? And when you've got ministries that are not really looking into any of the challenges that are associated with running a business, it's not aligned. And then same thing with Health Canada. We can I'm sure everyone would agree that the regulations are very burdensome. In order to get any type of micro cultivation, processing, nursery license, you need to have a fully built out facility, right?
So that's just to apply. That's not, you're not even guaranteed you'll get your license. You could spend $1 million, build a state of the art facility, and still get rejected, which is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous.
I understand why, from a regulator standpoint, they did it, because they don't want to have to deal with hundreds of applications from people who do not have the funding in place to be able to. So, which is the reason that anyone that has to fork out $1 million, which means that they're going to be borrowing from their family or from their friends, they're going to have a line of credit, and they're going to put a lot of stuff at risk in order to build without any guarantee to get a license. Is a very faulty system. They have a very lengthy and cumbersome application to put together. There's a lot of documents. And then once they get a license, they have to be able to stay compliant and maintain the license. And there's a very lengthy, detailed set of standard operating procedures that they have to have in place, they have to maintain, they have to follow. And all that we're not seeing in other industries where the level of regulation is just much more minimal. So again, it's not balanced when you look at the, across industries, other crops. Why are we putting such a higher burden on cannabis than to other crops? And that's really one of the challenges. That, and then the stigma. Like I mentioned earlier, that okay, we're doing better with the stigma, but there's still a lot of stigma attached. Very hard for people to get funding, to get financing. The banks are putting a lot of roadblocks. You can open a bank account. It's hard to access financial services. Insurance is another huge one. Some people are not able to insure the properties because they're growing cannabis. And
then you have people who have had long-time food farms who now start growing cannabis, and then their insurance company, who they've been paying money to for decades, are like, you know what, we're out. We considered increasing your premiums by 10 times, but we decided in the end, actually, we're just gonna pull out, and then that's pretty ridiculous too. I've got a question, Sophie, for you first, and then a question for both of you. So my question to you, Sophie, is I'm quite familiar with the federal regulations and how things play out there. I'm familiar with the distribution side on the province. What I'm unfamiliar and what I learned today in this conversation is that the file for cannabis was originally given to what was the name of the ministry that you were involved with that's focused on policing and security?
Public Safety and Solicitor General, which is where the Secretariat resides.
Okay, so the Secretariat is part of that ministry.
That's right.
Okay. I didn't realize that. I thought the Secretariat was their own unique, separate thing. I didn't realize it was a sub part of the. So that means it's still residing. That file still resides today with that department.
That's right, and then of course the distribution and the retail that rests with liquor distribution branch. So again, liquor and the liquor and cannabis regulation branch.
Yeah, the OCRB.
Although there's more, I would say there's more freedom, and even the liquor industry has evolved. When it first started, the liquor industry was actually very regulated as well. But over the course of the years, due to active lobbying by the liquor industry, you've seen a lot of rules evolve when you got now direct delivery. So you can see the wineries selling directly to restaurants and to private liquor stores. Same thing with beer. And so that's the model that cannabis should ideally evolve towards, right? Which the government is working on. The Secretariat and the liquor people are working on putting this direct sales program in place, and same thing with farm to get sales. So we're gonna get there, but it's not until 2022, which is here. And we have yet to see what this is gonna look like exactly. And so there's a few of us, like the Kootenays, and you're involved with that, and a few organizations that are involved in trying to put recommendations together to hopefully mold the way things
just sent that letter in yesterday.
Okay. The way things are going to shape up with respect to those two important programs, because it's really going to help to the craft cannabis sector. Direct delivery, my understanding is that is really targeting the small scale producers and the craft growers, which would allow them to sell directly to the retailers. And in the ideal world, the product would not go through the warehouse, would go directly to the retailers, thereby ensuring that the freshness of the product remains intact. The retailers would be able to pick their own products, and everybody will
not have a government official that has no understanding of cannabis be the person that decides what is good cannabis, what is bad cannabis. And today, their only definition of good cannabis is it's more than 20% THC, which is stupid. So my question to both of you, and you both kind of brought this up as an important thing, is that the file for cannabis is just with the wrong department. At the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council that I'm part of, that you alluded to, Sophie, we in our federal working policy group, we've kind of come to the conclusion that the most important thing that we can do is to push really hard for Health Canada to no longer be in charge of cultivation and for that file to be passed on to Agriculture Canada. I'm curious, like you guys both have a lot more experience with government than I do. Is that realistic at all? And if we keep pushing for that, can that go somewhere, or is that really going to be a waste of our time to keep bringing that up to government and express that, hey, we don't think Health Canada is the right ministry within the government to be in charge of this file?
Well, I can jump in there a little bit. I think at the federal level, it's a bit different between the federal and BC. The person that I want to take charge of the file is actually the Prime Minister and the Premier. Mm-hmm. These are the two people that are the heads of the government, and we have an economic crisis on our hands post-COVID-19. And both the Premier and the Prime Minister have shown a lot of leadership in recognizing that crisis. The government programs have been very well timed, but we saw the job numbers today from BC. They've gone down. The tourism industry is going to be in trouble for a while. We have this industry today that is ready. And I believe it's up to the Premier and the Prime Minister of this country to do what is required to get our economy going. And if I was a finance minister today, I would want to know why hundreds of millions of dollars are still being diverted into the illegal market when I could be getting $400-500 million in tax revenue every year from a thriving craft industry in BC. That makes no sense to me. So I think the leadership has to come from the top.
So how does that work on a practical level?
It isn't necessarily just a matter of one department over the other. On the specifics of that and the elected officials, I think the people who we elect, MPs from BC, need to step up on this opportunity as well. So the officials it's the elected officials' role to lead, and the Liberal government brought this policy in. Working with municipal governments is another example. They've left municipal governments essentially high and dry. They should be giving incentives for municipal and regional governments to say yes to craft farmers. So I think that there's a lot to be done there. On the moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, so to speak, from one department to the other, I think we have to change the rules first. And Health Canada, give them some credit, in December did announce their accelerated review of the microclass regulations and the labeling piece. So I think there are some improvements in training. We better see some changes out of that. And then I think there'll be a good time. It may be, Sami, that the provincial government is actually the best one to oversee the licensing, as opposed to just another bureaucracy in Ottawa, 3,000 kilometers away. I think you want less Ottawa involvement. And we've done this in many other government areas that we traditionally think of being federal jurisdiction. I think of immigration, where we have devolved a lot of immigration authority to provincial governments. Our healthcare system is a nationally enshrined act, but the provinces essentially administer it under a basic set of principles. We see it with fisheries management. We see it in human resource labor market training. So it wouldn't be unusual for the BC government to say, we don't want these decisions to be made in Ottawa.
Yeah.
We'll accept your regulations. Environmental assessments, boy, they do that all the time. I've been involved in joint environmental reviews where you don't have to go through two review panels. You go through one, and the provincial government administers it. And these are much more important issues than craft cannabis when it comes to environmental standards and our healthcare system. So to me, I think the better solution would be for the BC government, like they do in other areas, to say, look, we don't want these decisions to be made by people way far away from us. We think we can run the industry better. We think that we will respect your licenses because we want the same kind of outcomes that you do. So let us do it. And you can come in and audit it once in a while and check it out. I think that's ultimately, but you need the BC government to ask for that. The Canadian government would never impose that on a provincial government. You would need a provincial government who would say, you know what, we're ready to take it on. And I think that is probably the better outcome.
So two things. First off, like we've had lots of conversations with the agricultural ministry here in BC, and we know that they are super supportive of the craft cannabis industry. I think that what you're talking about is amazing. And then the second is a clarification question. Let's say that we were able to get the BC government 100% on board. The premier was going to fight for the craft cannabis industry, and they wanted to get everything out of Health Canada's hands, out of the federal government's hands, and into local, provincial ministries and governments. How does that work? Is that like a fight that needs to happen? Is that just because they asked the federal government gives it to BC? Like, could you walk us through like that hypothetical scenario?
The first thing you need to have is a recognition of failure.
Okay.
I think you need to have a statement that says that this current system that we designed ain't working. It's broke. 50 farmers in BC in 3 years almost is not success. So I think the first thing you need is that. Mm-hmm. And I think the feds have to recognize that they've really dropped the ball. And BC, of course, has the most to lose by dropping the ball on this file. But farmers are struggling across Canada. So I think that's the first thing that you need is that recognition of failure. And that's hard for governments to do, but mm-hmm. there's a relief that comes with that when the government can acknowledge, and I think people give governments credit these days for acknowledging, you know what? And Sophie says this all the time, maybe we were right to be tight at the beginning, but now's the time to really look at this again. So mm-hmm. that's number one. And then number two, there should be a recognition of what success actually looks like. In government, that's really important. And I can tell you 50 isn't success. How many craft farmers in BC do we need to service the consumer demand, not just in British Columbia, but across Canada and around the world? And that number, to me, is closer to 3,000, 4,000, closer to actually what it is today. And we need to agree on the number. And so once we agree on that, then I think you go forward and you've got a mission and you've got a goal and you've got the government behind it. And then you start to see the financial institutions come around. You start to see lenders coming into the game because the government has said, this is our project and this is what we're going to do. And these are all the wins that we're going to get out of it. And look at all the public health and safety programs that we're going to be able to fund with the revenue. We can put the money into children's hospitals, into daycares, into all kinds of things that really affect people's health and safety. Mm-hmm. Not this sham that cannabis is somehow a threat to our health and safety. Let's take the government revenue and put it into things that really are threatening our health and safety.
Just like Colorado and how their school system has completely evolved now with all of the cannabis money going.
Well, where's that money going now, Sami? Right? It's not coming to the taxpayer, and the consumers pay the price in the end. So I think those are the things that need to happen. And then I think then you've really got something going. And then I think it would make sense for the BC government to really step in and say, look, we're going to run the industry here and we're going to do it and we're going to make tons and tons of money off of it.
Sophie, do you have any last thing to share before we switch to questions?
Yeah, I was just going to add, this is something actually that was considered. So 3 years ago, when we developed the framework and we were looking at the regulations, it was definitely something on the table, is asking the feds to give us the authority to be able to license cultivation. But frankly, there was so much work to be done in terms of setting up distribution, licensing, and all that. It was parked. I don't know whether it's been revisited, but there was definitely some analysis done. I concur that having it done by the province would probably remove a lot of challenges because the province knows best what's good for people, for growers in British Columbia. Also, having 3 levels of government, because we haven't talked about municipalities, but that's another story there. Having 3 levels of government in such a complex regulatory system is just, it's hard to navigate. And I can tell you that it's easy to also, it's a bit like a ping pong game. That, the province will just point to the federal government if they can't answer the question or if they don't want to do anything. And the feds will point to the province if they don't want to do anything. So if you had just one regulator, then one central body responsible for everything, it would make things probably a heck of a lot easier. But is the province willing to fight it and take it over from the feds? I think that would be a good thing to advocate for. Absolutely.
Yeah. If we're still sitting here a year from now, Sami, with less than 100 farmers, I would be saying the BC government would have to step in, because then we're really missing this incredible opportunity. And my fear is we won't get it back. That the farmers are, it's the lack of urgency, I think, on this. Like even the direct sales timeline of 2022, like, my goodness, we could do that this summer. We've got the farmers, we've got the retailers. Why make it so complicated? Even our own BC government can't seem to grasp that. And to me, we could start doing direct sales within a month if they really wanted to be serious about it. It's ready to go. So
it's not hard to connect a producer to a retailer. That's a very easy thing.
And we're not trying to get around any standards, or even though we think that the licensing is over-regulated, we're still working within the current screwed up system. But to me, our own BC government says we won't be able to do this for another year and a half. Like, come on, we can do it a lot quicker than that. We have innovative people and the consumers are dying for it as well. So it's not just Ottawa. And I will say, even if BC does take it over, it won't be perfect. But I think there is an opportunity if we can't convince our BC government of this opportunity, here's the politics of it, right? If I'm sitting in Ottawa and I've got 100 files on my desk and the BC government is not bringing this up as a priority, it's not going to move up the pile. If the premier doesn't say to the prime minister at some point, there's a big opportunity that we're missing here and my province is really paying a price, we really need the BC. So if Ottawa isn't feeling it from the BC government, how can we say to Ottawa when they're going to say, well, your own provincial government is even asking for these changes? So I think that I'm optimistic. I do believe, as you have said, there's strong support in the government. I believe the financial officials should be much more involved in terms of the revenue opportunities coming up. And so I think that, that's I think where we need to be focused on.
So sorry to interrupt, Sophie. I just have one last question. This is for us in this case being the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council. Would yours recommendation to us then be, instead of focusing our energy on the federal government to say, hey, Health Canada shouldn't have this file, this should go to Agriculture Canada, instead to focus on the Premier's office here in BC to say, hey, the federal government has dropped the ball on this. BC's economy is really hurting in a way that, you could have, 1,000% more tax revenue come from the sector if things were done properly. Please put pressure on the federal government to take this file into the provincial hands where people are really going to care about this sector and ensure that the economy thrives. Would that be your recommendation then, David?
Well, I think the power grab on the licensing, I wouldn't do that yet because I just don't think it's realistic. People aren't there yet. And frankly, if I was the province, until I saw some movement on the regs, I wouldn't want to take it because it's a big pile of crap right now. So you don't want to, you want to own that. Maybe the feds will be too eager and say, yeah, you take it on. That happened with fisheries a number of years ago. So I think that I think we just need to have the political support. To me, it's a provincial. It's not just premier, but everyone will follow the leadership of the provincial government, I believe. Once the province goes out, and it's not the premier leads it, but it's the other ministers as well, the credit unions, all of these other institutions, there's going to be kind of a buy-in from the business community that this is truly an opportunity. And I think that will move the feds. I think one of the reasons the feds have not moved as quickly is because the BC government has not been quite as publicly vocal. I think they're working behind the scenes, but I think they need to be more publicly vocal in putting pressure on the federal government that it's because of decisions in Ottawa that our economy is now being hurt. Mm-hmm. Consumers are losing out on choice, and our illegal market is continuing to thrive.
So I do believe that there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes and that they're pushing the province, whether it's agriculture, whether it's the secretariat, that there's conversations happening with Health Canada and trying to move the dial. But it's never going to move fast enough, or not fast enough for us. Mm-hmm. And there's a few things that could be quickly fixed. I don't think there's anything such as a quick fix in government, just because there's a lot of process. That's why it's taking 1.5 years for direct delivery, because they have to develop the policies and they have to consult internally with all the different ministries. And then once they have the policy set out, then they can go to consultation. The consultation is going to take 2 to 3 months before you consult with everyone. Then they have to gather all the results from the consultation, and they have to draft the legislation, which takes quite a bit of time, and then finally gets into the House. And I'm just summarizing a process that's a lot more complex and lengthy, but that's how it goes. But fixes that we've been talking about for now years, like the whole marketing and advertising restrictions, I would hope Health Canada would look at that and start relaxing things, because it's going to be hard to differentiate craft cannabis products from one another. The packaging is insane as well, and I think that they've been hearing that from everyone. There's a lot of plastic that's used. It's so child-proof that it's even adult-proof that you can't even open any of those things, so that has to be fixed. There's a few other things that shouldn't take as long. Public consumption and consumption sites, I know we haven't talked about it, but when I see Las Vegas that legalized cannabis way after us, and they're opening up their first consumption site. And where are we? Like, there's farm to get sales that's being considered, and we know that consumption, on-site consumption, is not considered as part of the first phase. I'm hoping that the government will change their mind and that will be in scope. But we've been at it. It's been legalized for a few years now, and we still don't have any meaningful and appropriate consumption sites. So we're lagging behind. And that's the part that saddens me, is when I left the province 3 years ago, I was really hoping that things would move a lot faster, because I saw Canada as having that first mover's advantage, and seeing craft cannabis and how good of a product it is. And I know some of you have heard me say that, but I compare it to the Champagne of, like, being from France. I love it as the Champagne region is this pristine, high quality, high standards product that France is known on. I see BC Bud in the same fashion.
Totally.
We have the opportunity to create this appellation and this really good bud that will be known all across the world and really prove craft cannabis on the world stage. And unfortunately, we're lagging behind, and other countries are just taking a stand and moving a heck of a lot faster than we are. So that's
and if the farmers can't get in, then there's not going to be that BC Bud global brand. The global brand already exists, but not in that kind of legal supply chain way. All right, we have 4 minutes left here. We have 2 questions from the audience, both from Nicole Post, who you guys know because she is on the board of the BC Craft Farmers Co-op. Hi, Nicole. I think you're awesome. Thanks for being here today. Her first question with 3 upvotes is: do you think we will ever see a complete revamp from the feds, or do you think the changes will be small and based on our advocacy work? And I guess I'll slightly adjust that question to say, or alternatively, a complete revamp by BC taking the file and forcing that to take place. Because she wrote that before we had that discussion.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nicole. We like to call Nicole the future, because I think she's the future of the cannabis industry, and folks like Nicole. So good to see her on the line. My experience in government is when it moves fast. And so I think we need to be asking for the whole shebang and wholesale changes, which is what we've asked for. You have to ask. If you're an advocacy group, you have to ask for it all. Because if you go incrementally, you're never going to win. It's a negotiation like anything else. If you're negotiating with a family member over something or a colleague, you start by asking for it all. And I think that we have to demand that, because we are the experts in the industry. This policy has been developed, and I say we, I mean BC farmers. They weren't included, and I think that's why we're having a lot of trouble. It would be like sitting in the Canadian government and saying, you know what, we're going to write a policy on automobiles. But the main thing is we're not going to consult anybody who knows anything about cars. That's going to be our approach. Do you think that would ever fly? So here we have a situation where we have government saying, we're going to develop policies around cannabis, but we're not going to talk to the experts. Who would do that? So I think that those are areas to me where I think that we have to ask for it all, because we are the experts. And the government actually needs the farmers in the game. That's why the co-op we felt was important to have an organization that could be almost a policy arm for the government. It fills a gap that they don't have. So I think that's going to be key to success. So I think, and we've seen with the pandemic that where there's a will, there's a way. You know, we've always felt, oh, it takes a while for government to do things. Well, guess what? Governments can do things in a heartbeat if they really want. You know, this phrase of where there's a will, there's a way. That's very true here. And that's where the political leadership will come in. And I do believe if we see political leadership from the top embracing this craft cannabis opportunity as a provincial project for BC, even a national project post-pandemic, I think it can move very, very fast. And I think if the US legalizes, it'll move quicker because I believe those 4 companies that I just showed you earlier, they're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about Canada at that point. It's an over-regulated system. They'll go to the States. So we're going to need a domestic supply of local cannabis in the future. So I think we should be asking for it all. And Nicole, I think when it happens, when it changes, it will change quick. So that's my read of it.
So one last question in this last minute that we have, Linda. I'm sorry we won't have time for your question here today, but Nicole's second question, which has been here for a while and is apt for the conversation we were having, based on the current model and the coming changes we know about, how long do you think it will take to see craft cannabis representing a fair portion of the market share? Can we, as craft industry, take those 4 big US players out of the market?
Over to you, Sophie.
That's a big question. I'm trying to be realistic here. Just the pace of how things move, especially with government. So I think it's going to take a few more years for the craft cannabis to actually, pierce through. I concur with David. When there's a will, there's a way. And I know that regulatory framework that we put in place, we did it in 1 year. You probably think, wow, 1 year is a long time, but 1 year by government standard is actually quite fast to be able to put legislation, pass it in and all that. So it can be done, but there has to be a will. And can we take over the LPs? Well, I think the LPs are going to be focusing on other countries and exporting. I mean, I'm hoping that craft cannabis will be able to do that. But baby steps, if we could take over Canada first and then look at exporting, that would be a giant step. And I'm hoping we'll get there within the next, I'm not going to say year, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years. Provided that there's a strong will at the government level and that they see the economic opportunities, which I don't know that they're seeing much as of now.
So is it safe to say that for both of you, David and Sophie, the linchpin really is the BC government deciding that this is a priority and they have to do something about it? And unless that happens, we won't have the success that we want to see. Is that?
I think that's really important. Yes, and political leadership at the federal level to respond to that BC request. I think those are the 2 key big picture pieces that we need, Sami. And if that happens, our conversation next year at this time should be very different.
That's right.
Cool. Well, thank you guys both so much for your time. Oh, Sophie, do you want to give a little, say a little something about the micro conference that you guys have coming up before we wrap this up?
Yes, we're having a micro conference next Saturday, so it follows our AGM. The conference is from 11:15 to 12:15. It's via Zoom, virtual, of course. And hopefully, when restrictions are lifted, we'll be able to have an in-person conference. And we're going to have, a few speakers from the province, MPs, MLAs, as well as profiling what the co-op has been doing for the last few months. And again, it'll be a great opportunity to bring everyone together. And last year was a great success. We had a panel of MPs, MLAs. We had Jimmy Chung as well as our guest.
Tommy Chung. Come on, I got to correct you on that one. Yeah, we gave an honorary degree to Tommy Chung last year, so I don't know if we'll be able to repeat that this year. I don't know if Chief is available, but we're calling his agent as we speak. So.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I think that's going to be amazing. That's next Saturday, June 12th. For those of you who are interested in that, Nick shared a link in the chat, so feel free to go click through on that, check that out. Our next episode in 2 weeks from now is going to be with MLA Brittany Anderson, so we'll get a different perspective from a different type of government. And yeah, thank you all for being here, and David and Sophie, thank you so much for all of your
Sammy.
work on the BC Craft Farmers Co-op and for being here today to share your perspective. To the audience, thank you for being here, and I hope you all have a very wonderful rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.